Hey there, and welcome to the Vegan Gym Podcast. My name is Leif, and today we're going to be talking about how to sustainably lose body fat. So I have one of the coaches from our team, one of our awesome coaches, Coach Marc over here, and his client, Elyssa. So welcome both of you to the Vegan Gym Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Awesome. So I would love to start by, I know, Marc, you've had quite a journey in kind of your fat loss journey and losing quite a bit of weight. So could you talk through what that experience was like for you and how you kind of have used that experience to really help coach clients?
Yeah, definitely. So my story, I'd lost roughly about 100 pounds. I know we talked about that story on another podcast. It was about 1 year ago. And yeah, through that journey with losing 100 pounds, it definitely was not a straightforward process at all. It wasn't just, hey, start with the weight that I started at and just lose 100 pounds in one straight shot. There was lots of ups and downs, and it took many years actually to really lose the weight. It probably took in the region of about 5-ish years. And the reason why that took so long was because of the efforts that I would put in. So I would diet in a very unsustainable way. Too fast, too hard, 2-a-day trainings, too little calories, and basically push myself to the point where I might have lost a lot of weight, but I went so far that I would end up yo-yoing and bouncing back up with weight. And then that would create a bit of a cycle where naturally, as I regained the weight back, I would then want to diet again. And then I would go back and forwards. So like that sort of approach was really highly present in my weight loss journey. And because of that, and even speaking with other coaches, I think a lot of coaches on the team have also experienced similar sort of things. We now, myself and other coaches included at VSA, are really focused on how can we help somebody lose weight, but in a sustainable way, so that they do not have to go through those yo-yo cycles of losing that weight and then regaining it, and potentially even gaining a little bit of a disorder around food as well, which can be quite common when you go through these cycles. So that's a little bit about my story and why I think that's so important to treat fat loss as a sustainable thing that we do, and not just hey, let's just lose as much weight as we physically can in the next 8 to 12 weeks, because that usually will set you up for failure in the long term.
Yeah, the sustainable part is such an important piece, which is why I always emphasize that as part of someone's fat loss journey. So, Elyssa, I'd love to hear a little bit about your health and fitness journey, what you've kind of been through, how your relationship with food has evolved over the years, just kind of give us a little bit of background into what you have personally been through in your health and fitness journey.
Sure. I have also been on the yo-yo roller coaster diet for really most of my life. Since I was a teenager, I started dieting. I've tried many different programs, but none of them were as sustainable. And like Marc, I would lose a lot of weight, and then they would say, okay, now you're at this point where you can eat more again. I would think to myself, oh, I can eat more food? Amazing. And I would go way in the opposite direction. And it was like that for years and years and years, no matter what program I was on. So I would lose 20 pounds or 30 or 40 pounds even, and then I would gain back another 20 or get right back where I started and just be incredibly frustrated and not know what to do. And the term sustainable is thrown around a lot by a lot of different people and coaches and programs, but I don't feel like many of them were. They were either too restrictive, or you had to eat certain foods at a certain time, or buy their foods from their program, or whatever it was. And it just never worked for me. So when I joined VSA, and one of the first things Marc said in the program was, we're going to do this in a sustainable way, I was kind of like, well, I'll be the judge of that. I'll see what happens. So it's kind of a little bit of where I come from.
So what were some of the keys that you found that really kind of unlocked the sustainable aspect of your journey for you? Like, what have you discovered that has actually been the path to true sustainability?
Yeah, so great question. Basically, trusting Marc, number one, that he knew what he was doing, but also taking diet breaks. In the past, like Marc, it would be like let's do a straight shot and get as fast as we can to the goal that we want to get to. Or I have this event that I want to lose weight for, and it's like on this date, and I have to do whatever I can to lose weight for that event. But with Marc and VSA, I had been in a cut or a diet for about 11 weeks. And Marc was like, all right, it's time for a break. We're going to go into maintenance. We're going to up your calories. And I have to be honest, I was terrified. And I said to Marc, terrified. And he was like, okay, here's where we're going. And the number that he threw out, I was just like, are you serious right now? But I did it. And we did that for 4 weeks. And then I was ready to go back into another cut. Like I felt like, oh, okay, I feel good. I had a little break. And now I feel like I can go back and lose a little bit more weight. And he said, we're going to do another 8 weeks. And then we're going to come back to a maintenance again. So I think that not only letting my body have a little bit of a break, but also mentally knowing that I can eat more, and it's not going to be, oh, you eat more and you get to, gain 20 pounds again, but eat more and see that my weight stayed about the same and stabilized. And, oh, okay, I can do that. And then I can go back again and lose a little bit more weight. That was really helpful, not just physically for my body to take the break, but for my mind.
Yeah. I think that's huge. I think once you go through a period of maintenance, it can actually be quite healing if you've been on that journey for a long time, where you can actually eat more food and you don't see your weight going up, and you get to that point where you actually get true satiation at the end of a fat loss phase. You're not craving loads of, like donuts, pizzas, all of the bad things that can kind of happen when you diet for too long. And it gets to the point where you're like, hey, I can actually do this for a long period. You can start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel is the best way I can explain it from being through that myself. You can start seeing like, actually, I don't have to go through these cycles forever, just losing weight, gaining it back. I can actually see myself maintaining my weight, eating good, relatively clean foods for the most part, and just feeling good, satiated, and not getting into those binge sort of mentality. So yeah, thank you for trusting me with that. That was definitely what you said on the first call. It was
on the first call, I literally looked at Marc and I was like, why you?
Yeah, that's what she asked.
I was like, so why'd they put me to you? And he explained his journey and how he has knowledge and experience with what I've been through. And I still, to be honest, I had a little bit of doubt. I was like, well, we'll see what happens. And every time he told me we're going to change and do this, I would say, oh, I don't know. Are you sure? Are you absolutely positive that this is the right thing to do? And my husband was like, just do it. Just trust him and do it. But one of the things that you just said too was feeling satiation and knowing what that's like. I don't think before I ever actually knew what it felt like to feel properly satiated. When I was eating the higher calories after we were in a cut, I was like, oh man, I am so full. I can't even eat these calories. And Marc was like, it's really important that you eat all of the calories so you know what it feels like to be full. So in the future, when you're not following this, you have that feeling and you can be guided by that to know what full feels like. And sometimes I'm feeling like, oh, I'm a little bit over full, but I'm like, oh, but that's what it felt like when I was eating the calories and the macros that Marc had guided me towards. So I'm actually probably doing the right thing. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, Marc, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your philosophy around what is sustainable fat loss. How do you define that? Maybe with some simple numbers. And then also, as Elyssa touched on, one of the keys for her was maintenance phases.
Yeah.
So what do you recommend around maintenance phases, and how can someone use that as part of their successful, sustainable fat loss journey?
Yeah, definitely. I think when it comes to sustainable fat loss phases, we always want to start at the beginning and figure out kind of how much weight do you need to lose. That's always number one, because that'll guide you in letting you know kind of how many diets it's going to take, or how many weight loss phases or fat loss phases it's actually going to take to get to that goal. Because if you've got 100 pounds to lose, you're not going to be able to do that in one shot, in one go. It's not going to be possible. And that's sometimes what trips people up, is because they feel like, okay, I'm just going to diet and I'm going to lose all of the weight that I want to lose, and I'm just going to stop when I've lost all of that weight. And that's obviously not the sustainable approach. There's very few people that are 12 weeks away from their dream body. Some people are. It just depends on your starting point. And what we want to aim for is roughly about 0.5% to 1% of body weight per week, or maybe in the region of about 1 pound. If we were to just, average it out, let's just say 1 pound of body fat per week, something like that would be sustainable. So if you want to diet and you have 50 pounds to lose, okay, so that would end up being in a sustainable way where we're not dropping the calories too low, and basically starving ourselves. That would take about 50 weeks, which is a long time. It's a long time to stay in a calorie deficit. It's not going to feel really good to do that. The likelihood of success in actually maintaining that for 50 weeks is very low. So we would actually need to, the sustainable approach to this would be to break it down into diet phases of somewhere like 8 to 12 weeks. And then have, after that 8 to 12 weeks, you might lose around about 8 to 12 pounds, let's just say. Then you would work into a maintenance phase. The maintenance phases can be anywhere from 50% to 100% of that dieting phase, or that fat loss phase, I should say. And that, what that's going to do is it's going to give you a little bit of a physiological and psychological break from the weight loss phase. And then that's going to allow you to then enter into the next fat loss phase and basically work down in steps like that. So that, for me, that is the main thing with sustainable approach. It's making sure the calories not too low, eating foods which are not unsustainable. So not eating in a way which is unsustainable. Let's say I've got to eat 5 times per day and it's only just grilled tofu and broccoli, like foods like that, which maybe not the most enjoyable foods all of the time. And also planning out the fat loss phases in a way where you can have these diet breaks, because they are super important. So yeah, those are the main things that I like to focus on with sustainable fat loss.
Yeah.
I think one of the things too is whenever I wanted to jump into something, like when I was in the top of the yo-yo, where I was at the higher point of my weight, and I was thinking to myself, oh, I really want to lose weight again, I'm going to jump into another program. I would jump in with the food and the exercise, and I would do as much exercise as I could and the food and all the things, instead of easing in like, okay, we're going to take this step and do some exercise and get some movement in, but not like kill myself with cardio and strength and all the things. Like a coach that I had in the past had me on super low calories and a step goal and a cardio goal and working out in the gym 5 times a week. And after 6 months of that, I was bound to just rebound and back in the other direction.
Yeah, that's a big point I didn't touch on, was the approach to the exercise portion. That's quite common. It's like, hey, I want to lose the weight. You're super excited, super motivated, and then you end up setting up a plan or working with somebody that will get you to do way too much. And if it's not sustainable, like you can't do that amount of exercise for a year, is what I like to say. It's probably not the sustainable approach, because if you do 2 times per day, you're doing all this cardio, doing all this weight training, like what happens at the end of that fat loss phase? Typically what happens is, hey, I've done this exercise just to get the result. So I got the result, and now, hey, look at that, I've lost the weight. Now I don't want to do the exercise, because you were doing the exercise for the specific reason of getting the weight loss. And I don't like to look at exercise like that personally. I like to look at exercise as something we get to do because we enjoy it. We want to get strong. We want to build muscle. But overall, there's an element of enjoyment in the exercise itself. Because if we do exercise just for a specific end result, that in and of itself, not only the amount of exercise we do, can be really unsustainable, because we only do it for a short period of time, So I always like to get people to enjoy the exercise that they do, because if we don't have that enjoyment factor, it's going to be hard to maintain long term. Like if you lose 50 pounds, okay, that's really cool. That's amazing. You've worked really hard. But like a year after that 50-pound weight loss, like where would you be if you didn't like to continue with exercise and to keep maintaining that weight loss? So that's the big thing about exercise is just setting the right amount for you, which is sustainable, trying to get some enjoyment out of that, and then thinking, okay, well, what could I do for the rest of my life? Because we talk a lot about fitness is never something you kind of complete. It's always something that you'll kind of do for the rest of your life in some way, shape, or form. So trying to find some enjoyment in that is super sustainable. And if you can get some weight loss at the same time as doing things you love, that's a really good recipe for success.
Yeah, and that's how you really break out of the yo-yo effect, when you are no longer viewing it as a consolidated period of time that you need to eat these certain foods and do these certain workouts, and I'm just going to do this for a period of time until I hit my goal. You have to ask yourself, like you just pointed out, what happens after that point? Because lots of people can lose 20 pounds in a unsustainable way, but then what's going to happen after you accomplish that? You're going to likely head in the other direction if you haven't set yourself up for success. So Elyssa, I'd really love to hear a little bit more detail about what did you find was a successful approach in terms of the foods that you were eating, in terms of how you were moving your body? How did you kind of break free of previous approaches and focus more on things that were truly sustainable for you?
I think one of the big keys, as you were mentioning, was what kinds of food you're eating. I'm eating foods that I really love. I love food and I love all kinds of food, but I feel like it helps to be able to have some things that you are more like treaty, and some things obviously to boost your health. So all of my meals have a lot of vegetables in them and a good protein and some fats. But I don't limit myself to not having some ice cream, or most of the time it's made out of bananas, banana ice cream, nice cream. Or, some pretzels, or the salty things are really my favorite, chips and pretzels, but I just make sure I have them in proper amounts. And I guess basically just what I'm describing is flexible dieting, and kind of the 80-20, although sometimes I slip more into 70-30 or 60-40, but it varies week to week. And as far as exercise goes, I used to think the gym and strength training was my favorite thing to do. And I do still love it, and I love the results that I get from it. But after doing it for so long, I kind of started feeling like, oh, I might want to try something new and something different. And I live in a condo, and there's a pool, and we have a Peloton and it's a treadmill, and I live in a beautiful place where I can run outside. And I said to Mark, I think I might want to train for a triathlon. And he was like, let's do it. And that to me is more fun. I was getting tired of just going to the gym and walking, or outside even, or on the treadmill and getting steps. I wanted to add something new and something different and something exciting. So I feel like just being able to change it up, and as Marc was saying, do something that is fun and enjoyable and that you can see yourself doing. And who knows, like in 6 months from now, I might be like, I don't want to run again for a while, so let's get back in the gym and do more. So we had changed from like a split with upper lower to just full body days, so I could still have time in the gym and still not lose my strength while I'm training for the triathlon. But who knows what we'll do after that goal is achieved. We'll see.
Yeah, that's so cool, and such a great example of the flexibility that we are talking about. So always asking yourself, hey, is this what I still want to be eating? Is this how I still want to be moving my body? And if the answer is no, you can change. You can change it.
Yeah.
You can change everything. And there are some kind of general numbers that can serve as a helpful guide when it comes to kind of your nutrition in particular. And you mentioned one set of numbers, 80-20. So focusing on kind of generally whole plant foods that serve as somewhere on the order of 80% or 70 or 60% of your diets. And then you have some more room for processed foods, whether it's ice cream or pretzels or whatever you want to have, and being able to integrate both of those together in a way that's not just going to allow you to accomplish your fat loss goal, but also do that in a really healthful way that is going to set you up for long-term health as well as fat loss success.
And speaking of too, because I added all this extra activity, it's not really extra, it's just in a different way. My maintenance, or where I'm at, the calories that I'm eating has also gone up. And Marc is like, he'll look at, assess my weight and be like, I think we need to add some more calories. And who's going to get mad at that? No one I know. I have never in my life thought that I would be eating as much as I am and sustaining my weight. I just didn't think it was possible for me. I thought something was broken because I had a number in my head that I thought this is what I have to eat, but it has gone way above and beyond that. But it's not at this point. I still want Marc just to tell me what to do, but it's not Marc telling me what to do. He's, what do you think about adding another 100 calories? I was like, Marc, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. He's like, this is a democracy. We're going to talk about it. We're going to make the decision together, which I loved. So
yeah, I do like to do that. I like to talk about it because there's an element of education there as well. And I think that's what I like to bring to anybody that I work with. It's like, hey, let's talk about this. This is the reasoning behind it. How do you feel about this? Okay, this is what I think would be a good idea, but I'm not just going to tell you what to do, because we need to, well, I believe at least that there has to be some level of like thought from, if you're working with a coach, like try and think about it and like, ask questions, which Elyssa does, ask a lot of questions, which is really helpful because that's how you learn. And if you don't learn, you just do something on autopilot, then that's not gonna teach you how to sustain things long term. If you ask questions and you're really interested in understanding how to diet sustainably, how to be the most balanced with your food, how to understand maintenance breaks, that is actually going to set you up for success, because now in the future, 10 years down the line, it's like, hey, I know what to do. And that's something we like to do in the Vegan Superhero Academy, is teach people how to actually do this long term. So we'll get you great results, but at the same time, like actually maintain those results long term. Whereas, let's say a very common thing is somebody would go onto bodybuilding.com, and they'd be like, okay, this diet plan, this training plan, and just do it. And they're doing all the cardio, they're just following this meal plan, and they're, doing this resistance plan, but they don't know any of the rationale behind it. They just follow it, So it's like getting up at 6 a.m. They're doing the fasted cardio, which is not needed, by the way. But they're doing the fasted cardio. They're eating the meal plan, and then at the end of that, yeah, they've got great results, but they've learned absolutely nothing about fat loss. And then they're like, okay, well, I look better now. I've lost the weight. Now what do I do? I've no idea. And then because they've dieted so long and all of those practices they've put into place to lose the weight, they do not want to continue doing at all. They will then now go into a zone of being totally confused, being a little bit lost. And that's what you'll see a lot of people. And this is where I used to be, where I would feel just totally lost. And I'd be like, okay, what do I do now? I had no plan for the end of that dieting phase, and then I'll just go back to my old like bad habits essentially. So the bad habits will then come back in. So if we can find good balance with food and exercise and try and build good habits into ourselves, then the things that we will do to get the weight loss will be the things that we do to maintain the weight loss afterwards as well. So it's it's really good to ask questions, and I like to talk about those practices that we're going to do, so that Elyssa understands this and just fully understands what we're working towards.
And that's one of the biggest things that I learned too, was how to do it. I've always asked questions, but I've never really gotten a lot of great answers. So I used to say, I'm really good. I'm practically an expert at losing 20 pounds. You want me to lose 20 pounds? I'm great at that. But what do I do once I get there? I'm also really good at putting the weight back on. So that was one of the things that I absolutely love to ask a question. And Marc is always there to provide great answers and teach me and learn. So now that I'm in the place where I am, I'm learning new things, not just how to diet.
Yeah, and I just really want to emphasize that it's not about achieving fast results. It's not about getting to the 20 pounds or whatever the goal is as quickly as possible. It's about doing it sustainably. Mm-hmm. So this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. Your goal is to do this long term. And once you get the extra body fat off that you want to lose, then how do you maintain that body, that new body for life? That is the goal. And if you do not have that's ultimately the goal, not actually the number of pounds that you want to lose. It's ultimately, how do I get and maintain my desired body composition?
Yeah.
So once you get to that point, it's all about, how do I sustain this and how do I continue progressing forward?
Well, one of the things that I think is actually really amazing about this time is that I actually know that I don't ever have to diet again. I'm at the point where I'm fine where I'm at, and I know I'm never going to go back. So if I want to do something in the future, if I wanted to lose more fat or change up my program, I could, just for the benefit or the enjoyment of it. I never had that before. I never had the, oh, I'm never going to have to do that again, which is amazing. This is just, I could be like this for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's ideal. And that's what we want to get to, is get to that point where if you've got body fat to lose, you just want to get to that point where your body composition is in a nice, healthy place where you feel comfortable with that. And then from there, you're just going to maintain. So that's the goal. But how we get there, that's what trips you up. As Leif said, it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And taking that slower, sustainable approach is actually, ironically, the fastest approach in how to get there. Because if you go too quick, you will almost inevitably bounce back and add weight back. Even if it's not as much as, it can be quite drastic where you could put all of that weight back on. But, the more intense that approach to fat loss is, the more likelihood you will regain some weight. So actually going a little bit slower and being like, okay, I'm going to have a little bit of patience with this. I'm not going to expect to lose like 2-3 pounds every single week, for 12, 15, 16, 20 weeks, whatever it might be. I'm going to go for about 1 pound per week. I'm going to go slow. If it's a little bit less than it, if it's 0.8 pounds per week, that's fine. I'm going to go nice and steadily, nice and slowly. I'm going to take diet breaks. And even though it looks like, or maybe even feels like, hey, this is actually going to take quite a long time, maybe I should go a little bit faster. The thing with that approach is you will not regain the weight. So like Alyssa's feeling right now, she's like, hey, I won't regain that weight again. Now that is actually setting you up for success, because instead of you going down a weight, rebounding, down a weight, rebounding, you can just consistently go down, down, down. You have obviously, the maintenance breaks, which are needed, but you'll never go backwards. So this is what I like to say to people. It's like, we can take it slow, but once you lose weight, you're never going to go back. So like all weight that you see coming down right now, that's never going to be going back on again. So have a little bit of patience with that and just allow it to be a little bit slower than what you might want, because it will end up being the fastest approach overall.
To your point, I've been in the program and working with you for, I think, about 10 months now. It's been 30 years of me going up and down and up and down and up and down. And if I had done this 30 years ago, then I wouldn't have spent 30 years for what I could have done in 10 months.
Yeah, that's huge.
I mean, that might be a little extreme. But,
no, that is huge. Yeah, no, that's it. I really wish if this was possible, I could have went and coached myself when I was like 19 years old, because it took me like 5-6 years to lose 100 pounds. And I know if I coached myself, maybe it would have took 2 years, something like that, maybe less. But I would have saved myself 5 years, at least 3 or 4 years of really bad habits, really bad approaches to diets, feeling terrible, basically getting like eating disorders around these approaches that I used to have to fat loss. I would have saved myself a lot of heartache, a lot of emotional distress, because that's the thing. It actually can cause a lot of emotional distress, to lose weight. We want to lose weight. Why do we want to lose weight? Well, we want to lose weight obviously for health reasons. We want to be healthier. We also want to look a certain way as well. We maybe don't feel comfortable in our body, and that can drive us to do the unsustainable approach. That's why a lot of people do that approach, is because I want to look a certain way. Okay, I'm just going to go there. I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to lose that weight. And then what ends up happening is you can't maintain that approach because it's too unsustainable, and you just yo-yo back. And now you're like, oh, now I'm back at square one. Feel really bad about myself. Oh my gosh, okay, well, I'm going to try this again. So you do it again, and then you come back. And in that process of kind of succeeding a bit, then failing, then succeeding and failing, and basically getting no further ahead, you end up feeling just really demotivated. You don't feel good about yourself. And throughout that whole process, you could create some extremely bad habits around food. I know I personally did. And yeah, it's, if we can get there in the most sustainable approach possible, that will save you a long time of, heartache and pain. And like Elyssa said, if she could have saved 30 years of that yo-yo effect just from, dieting in a sustainable way, like that can be huge. It would have increased the quality of my life a lot if I could have, somehow teleported back in time and to coach myself. Like that would be huge. So it's really important to take this quite seriously and to set yourself up for success with fat loss phases, just so that we do not put ourselves in those periods of time where we rebound back in weight, and we could essentially lose a year and be no further ahead. So
yeah, such great points. And again, I just really want to emphasize, after you shared all that the goal is doing this slowly and sustainably, not quickly and likely unsustainably. So we all want to get to our end goal in a efficient way, and that's important. But as you pointed out, the efficient way also, maybe on the surface, doesn't look like the fastest way, but ultimately it actually is. So Elyssa, how did you kind of get the courage to try another program, trust another coach, and do that, trust in your ability to just try this again and go through that process? How did you kind of break through the challenges that Marc was just talking about in doing this for decades and saying, well, let's try one more time?
Well, I always kind of looked at it, even though, as Marc was saying, it's really mentally draining and can feel, I definitely had some disordered eating myself as well. I always said to myself, as long as I keep trying, it's not a complete failure. So I've literally tried a lot of different programs. One of the programs that I did include a mindset piece. And that mindset piece included working with a therapist, which was incredibly helpful to work through some of those reasons why I had that disordered eating. And then once I felt like, after working through some of those things, I could try again, I had actually seen some videos from the vegan gym on YouTube and seen the way that you approach veganism and the whole dieting or eating just in general, versus like eating enough protein and having balanced macros and all of those things. So I thought, okay, let me give this program another try. And that's, I guess, another reason why you have so many coaches. And that was another reason why I was so, a little bit skeptical of why they were giving me to Marc, but I had a great conversation with a member of the team, and he listened to my story and where I came from and what I was hoping for and looking to achieve. And they thought Marc was a great fit, and he is. And I don't know, I guess I'm just very trusting person. And I was like, I've trusted every program that I've done and every person that I've done, but I saw all the testimonials and I saw the approach, and I thought, well, that approach is an approach that I've had success with and that I've enjoyed in the past. So let's give it another try.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah. Behind the scenes, we put a lot of effort into pairing clients with the right coaches. We spend sometimes, over an hour going through and really thinking, after we've had a conversation with a new client, who is going to work best with that client and give them an amazing experience. So yeah, you're also not alone in thinking, oh, is this really the right fit for me? But we've been doing this a long time.
Well, that's another thing I've learned. I said I ask a lot of questions, but that's another thing I've learned, because I was with another program and I wanted to work with a certain coach that I had seen online, and they said that coach is not available, but we think you'd be a great fit with this other coach. And it turned out that other coach was not a great fit for me. So I wasn't willing to, not just, the time and the effort and the money, all of it together, I wasn't willing to go through that again. So I wanted to make sure I was with the right person.
Yeah, that is important.
It is, yeah. And that approach, like I think the last one before you ended up, maybe working with a therapist, like that was probably one of the worst approaches to like fat loss personally maybe you have experienced before. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
In terms of results, yeah, I got great results. Well, let me qualify that. I lost a lot of weight. That is not great results, because a lot of things came along with that were terrible. For one thing, I probably lost too much weight. And because I lost it so fast, it was not healthy. I lost muscle, even though I was trying to maintain it in the gym. I also had a terrible experience messing up my hormones as a female. And people around me were very concerned. I was sleeping terrible. I was living on Diet Coke and caffeine to get me throughout the day. I had zero energy. I thought I had some sort of autoimmune disease, because by 2:00 in the afternoon, I was done. Like, that was the end of my day. My husband knew, if we don't get anything done by 2:00, Alyssa's done. She's going to bed, basically. Speaking of, just going back for a second, when I got into maintenance that first time when we took that diet break, I was like, oh, is this what it feels like to have energy? I had never felt that before, because in my life I was either on a diet in unsustainable calories, eating really low and exercising a lot, or binging and feeling really lethargic and sleepy because I was eating way too much. So I never knew what it felt like to have actual good energy and be able to, throughout the day, even at 3:00 in the afternoon or 4:00 in the afternoon, without coffee or without, some sort of outside stimulant, help me keep going. So that was amazing. But yeah. And then when I finished with that coach, when I left her, I just ballooned right back up. I saw food in front of me and I was so excited. Now, she wanted to, I'll give her a little bit of credit. She wanted to start bringing my calories up, but we never had conversations. We never talked about anything. She never explained anything to me. It was basically just, this is what you're going to do. And in my mind, which was a bit disordered at that point, I was like, no, I don't want to gain weight. I don't want to fill out, as she described it. That's not my goal. My goal is to stay where I am. So I would ask questions, but since we never had a conversation, I would get an email back or a 2-minute Loom video where she just told me my new macros for the next week. Another thing actually that is very sustainable about this approach is that you don't change my macros on me on a weekly basis. This is what we do, and we do this for a while, and it's going to work for a while, and then we'll adjust after the proper amount of time that we've done this and things aren't working anymore. Whereas in the past, I change every 2 weeks or every week sometimes. And that's really hard to keep up with. It's, every week I have to go into my fitness pal and change my macros and then figure out how my food is going to change based on that. It was a constant mental struggle and mental strain. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, that's really common. It's like some coaches, it's basically just, this is what you do, just do it. Which can be good for I think she was more of like a bodybuilding style coach.
Yeah.
So it makes sense, and like bodybuilding coaches are very much just do what I tell you. And bodybuilders kind of like that, they actually appreciate that to some extent, where it's just, I just don't want to think, I just want to do. And it's like, okay, that's great, but you're not going to learn anything from that. And, it's very common. And in fact, actually, we can talk about this a little bit more. It's like bodybuilding of itself is obviously a really cool sport, but a lot of the practices that bodybuilders will implement, they've kind of seeped into like mainstream dieting culture in a way, where it's like, 5 a.m. hoodie on, do my fasted cardio, everything's prepped in a meal prep container, and it's just, I'm going to push myself hard, I'm going to diet like that. Like bodybuilding is very unsustainable. It's very difficult for bodybuilders to even do the things that they do, never mind asking somebody that has a job, that has a family, that has kids to look after, to live like a bodybuilder. It's impossible. And that approach is like, okay, well, how do I do this? Okay, well, bodybuilders lose weight and get in shape. Okay, I'm going to do that. Or I'm going to work with a bodybuilding coach. So then you get trained like a bodybuilder and you don't end up learning anything. You just get pushed to the point of where your body just breaks down. And then at the end of that fat loss phase, like, I lost a lot of weight, but I don't want to do this again. I don't want to do this for another 2 weeks, never mind another 2 years or 20 years. So what do you end up doing? No, I'm not going to the gym for a while. I'm not eating that food. I'm going to eat some pizza because I like pizza. And then that's where the disorder starts. So that I think that's a big thing to pull up there. And the length of time, because I believe that diet was like, did you say it was like 6 months? Like 6 months, just like losing fat every single week? Just
it might 6 or 7 months. Definitely 6. Might have even gone further, 7 or 8.
Yeah. So like when it comes to sustainability, to do that, I mean, kudos to you for sticking to that. It just shows like your willpower overall to do that, because I would really struggle to hit my cardio, hit my calorie deficit every single week for like 7 or 8 months. Like that's really impressive. And a lot of people, including myself, would not be able to do that. So again, the length of time that we try to lose the weight, that will also be a big factor, because if we try to aim for a 6 month fat loss phase, you will not sustain that. And that will lead to, if I'm not doing it, what am I doing? Well, I'm doing the opposite of that. Typically, it's because it's an all or nothing approach. I say that I'm doing all of my cardio, I'm meal prepping every last little thing, every last element of my food is perfect. And if I'm not doing that, then I'm doing what I used to do beforehand. So it's like that on off, that all or nothing sort of approach to diet, and why we need to break it up into smaller, more manageable chunks. So if you need a year of fat loss to legitimately get to your body composition goal, we're not going to diet for a year. We're not going to try and aim to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to break it into manageable chunks of 8, 12 weeks and just hit one chunk at a time. And that way you can get to that year, have lost all of that weight, but not have been dieted down into a hole where you just feel like, I just want to eat everything in sight because I feel terrible. So it's so it's good to point that up, and the experience that you had and how that did really affect you when it comes to like your choices around food, but also hormonally, what that can do as well, to a female, to a male. It can really wreak havoc on your hormonal health. And we'll not go fully into that because that would probably be another podcast in and of itself, but it can have really bad effects to your physiological and mental health.
One of the things that you mentioned too is how in bodybuilding, it's very much like do this and It's very strict. And that's sort of my personality. You give me a couple of numbers, I'm going to follow those numbers, whether I'm bodybuilding or training for that or not. That's just, my personality. And one of the things that we're working on now is loosening up on that a little bit and learning to not be so concerned with hitting every macro so perfectly. In fact, one day a week now on Saturdays, we are doing a free day, not a cheat day, not a eat everything you want day, but a just try and
intuitive eating.
Yeah, intuitive eating. Eat just without tracking and see how that goes. And which ultimately would be the long-term goal, to not have to track and to be able to eat every day like that and still maintain my weight loss.
Ultimately, that is exactly the key to long-term sustainable weight management and continuing to accomplish your health and fitness goals. If you can transition to an intuitive eating plan that sets you up for long-term success in that way, that is the true game changer. And that's ultimately where everyone ideally gets to, because there is no part of tracking your food, even on just some days for the rest of your life, there's no aspect of that that is sustainable. At least certainly not for me, and not really anyone I know.
Yeah, that's difficult. It's a good tool. I like to think about tracking food as a good tool. It'll help you with weight loss, and I like to use it for maintenance to get an idea of what those maintenance calories are. But yeah, I mean, you don't want to be like 70 years old and pulling up MyFitnessPal or Chronometer just to track your food. We want to get to that point where we use the tool just like you might use a drill, to put up a shelf. You use the tool, you're not going to carry that drill around with you for the rest of your life. You just want to use it to get the job done, and ideally build great habits with food. And if you can maintain your weight with the food that you eat, in terms of having good balance with that food, the 80-20 rule, you understand what portion sizes are, you understand how you feel full, you understand real satiation, and you're also not coming off the back of a fat loss phase, which can really skew like hunger cues. So you could be more hungry than you normally would be at the end of a fat loss phase naturally, because you've been eating less food for a while. But if you just been maintaining for a while, your satiation is super high. You've got great habits with food. Your exercise habits are great as well. You work out very regularly. Then it gets you to that point where you can just start slowly pulling away the tracker and just eat the food that that you like, the food you enjoy, the food that it's going to get you around about that maintenance. You don't have any crazy desires to eat like in a binge in any sort of way, and you're just going to maintain activity as you enjoy. That is like the true long-term sustainability. And obviously with Elyssa's past, I feel like this is a big thing we want to work into, and she's naturally a little bit nervous about that, because it's like, oh, I don't know if I trust you, which is fine. That's completely fair. So we'll say, hey, let's just do 1 day per week. Let's just aim to do that, just to get a feel for it. And it's been working extremely well. And then we'll aim, okay, well, let's do it another time. And then just slowly, gradually transition to that point where she can maintain her body composition, feel great, look great, and not have to track every last little thing. And that sometimes can be dependent on your history with food. That can sometimes take longer. It depends on the person. But being so obsessed with the weight on the scale, whether that's the bathroom scale or the food scale, and like hyper analyzing every last little thing and being stressed and worried about that, is not sustainable. So we want to break free from that. And a lot of those thoughts and feelings can actually be brought up from fat loss in and of itself, in the sense that we get really obsessed with that, and it's just an unsustainable mindset that we kind of develop around fat loss, where everything has to be perfect. I need to track everything. I need crazy control. And if we don't have that, then we feel like we're vulnerable. But if we can get to that position where we feel like we have great habits, with food, exercise, and we're not super hungry, we can have more confidence in our own body and our own intuition, then we can start getting to that longer term sustainable path where you're just intuitively eating and not worrying about gaining weight back.
So let me just clarify, because at this point, it's not as much about trusting you, it's more about trusting myself.
Yeah.
But also, like you're saying, every weighing and making sure everything is exactly perfect and getting away from that. I was at one point in my life where if there was one leaf of spinach that put me 1 gram over whichever macro, I would take that one leaf of spinach off. That one leaf of spinach is not going to hurt anybody, but that's where I was. And now I'm at a point where I actually look forward to my Saturday, where I don't have to get all the different scales out and I don't have to worry. And I'm just like doing what I do throughout the rest of the week, just, looking at it and knowing and trusting myself and feeling that way. And it's also more sustainable too, because now we've even incorporated going out to meals and trusting that I can eat a meal at a restaurant and see the right portion and eat the right amount. And even if it does make the scale go up a little bit, it's okay, because then throughout the rest of the week, it's going to be okay. It's all going to measure and weigh out and come back to the homeostasis of where things were, big word. But yeah, so, and even sometimes still, I'll say to Mark, I'll say something like, I don't know, like when we first started using this going out to eat thing, he'd be like, it's 1 day a week. It's one meal out of the restaurant. No big deal. Drop in a bucket. And I'll say, oh no, if we did a drop in a bucket, that would be 1 meal a week out at a restaurant once a month. And he's like, nope. Once a week, still drop in a bucket. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to try it. And it's been working out. And everybody appreciates it. My friends, I can actually go out and have a meal out with my friends or with my husband, or go to the movies and have some popcorn and like live and do all the things and not be worried about, oh my gosh, what am I eating?
So how has your kind of body composition changed? Not just your weight, but how do you feel your body composition has changed, and what has it felt like to witness those changes?
Well, in the simplest terms, it's changed dramatically. But like I said, I've been in the gym working on building muscle as well. I never thought that I would just naturally be this size, or have the muscle definition that I have. I actually have a completely different shape, and I never thought that it would look this way. I'm not like, I don't know. Throughout my whole life, I was always a heavier person. So I didn't know there was a smaller person in there. And it's just exciting to see and to know that it is going to continue to change, even if I don't necessarily change my diet and we're at maintenance, still working on building muscle and still working on those other goals that I was talking about. My body composition is still continuing to change, which is really exciting.
So what would you say to someone who really feels like they have a larger natural body and they don't know if it's actually possible, they don't believe it's actually possible for themselves to get to the body composition, the body that they want to have, and actually be able to maintain that in a really sustainable way? What would you say to someone who just doesn't believe that's possible and could use some encouragement?
I guess I would say you never know unless you try. And unless you give it a real good like college try, like give it time, because as we were talking, it takes time and you never know what's happening underneath. Like one of the things that I learned was even if the scale and the number on the scale doesn't move, you could still be losing fat. And that to me was a little bit mind blowing. So I learned to worry a little bit less about the number on the scale and a little bit more on the photos and the tape measurements that we took. But, I guess everybody's different and everybody's body is different. So you just have to work at it a little bit and see what happens. But I've seen so many different stories of people with all different kinds of body shapes that have transformed. And if you don't give it a try and see what happens, then you'll never know what's under there.
Yeah.
So
I think that's the biggest thing you do have to try, because like a lot of people will just think, well, I'm doomed to kind of look like this.
Exactly.
That's one of the things I used to think. I always grew up, I was told that, oh, well, that's just your body shape. That's just who you'll be. That's basically your destiny. Like, you're just going to be the fat guy, that's just the way it is, and obviously that is only true to a certain extent, as if I let it. And if I didn't try to actually lose weight, then I'd be 100 pounds overweight right now, or potentially even more. So it's more of a mindset thing that holds us back. It's not that you can't lose weight, you cannot be a smaller person, you cannot be lean. You definitely can do all of those things, but you have to believe it in yourself. You have to be like, okay, I know I can do this, and I'm going to try. Or maybe you don't know that you can do it, but at least you're going to try, and then you'll see. And as long as you do it in a sustainable way, then you'll actually see the weight coming off, and you'll be like, oh, wow, I've actually lost some weight. I can then go a little bit more and a little bit more. And then you'll be so surprised at like how far you can actually go in the long term by taking that approach. But you have to think that you can actually achieve your goal. You can achieve your goal, but don't be held back by, this is my body shape, I'm always going to be a big person. That's not true. And if you think like that, then you will be right. Because if you think that I'm always going to be a big person, then the likelihood is your mindset and the way you think will then dictate what you end up going out and doing in the world, which is just going to McDonald's drive-through and not exercising, because it's like, well, what's the point? You'll just feel full of apathy. You won't try anything. And naturally, that will lead you to just always being that big person.
And not only is it worth it in the end, but you're worth it. And I think a lot of people, or some people, might not think that they're worth it, and they might not love themselves at that moment. And that's something that I worked on a lot too, is to realize that I'm worth doing this. And in the end, it's worth it. So it works on both sides.
So we've touched on maintenance phases a lot so far in our conversation, and I'd love to hear how did you kind of trust transitioning into a maintenance phase? Because I know that's challenging for a lot of people, especially if they have just, they think, hey, if I increase my calories, I'm going to gain weight. And that's just how it is. So I need to keep my calories super low. And I mean, that's a little bit of a different topic, but maintaining a moderate calorie deficit to get you to actually lose body fat in a sustainable way. But then how do you transition to maintenance after that? And what kind of tips would you give to someone who maybe struggles with the idea of increasing their calories?
So the first thing you said, how did I trust? And I didn't, but I was learning to trust Marc. And he actually was a great guide, because he told me exactly what to expect. Like, yes, the scale is going to bump up a little bit, because most of what I was increasing was carbs. So it's going to bump up a little bit because I'd be holding on to a little bit more water. But then it would even out, and it might even come back down, which is exactly what happened. And I think it was after that first maintenance phase where my trust in him actually just exponentially like increased. But I was terrified and I didn't trust, but I did it because I wanted to make this work this time, and I didn't want to have to go through this again. And I wanted to do everything exactly the right way. And the first thing he said to me was, we're going to do this in a sustainable way. So if this was the sustainable way, this is what I was going to do. And so that first break that we took, we jumped up to maintenance pretty quick, because we were only taking a 4-week break. And then we went back into a cut. And I did see all the same things. I think I texted Mark even at one point, and I was like, if that scale goes up 1 more pound, I'm going to like jump through this phone and strangle you. But it didn't. So I was like, all right. And we were only going to be there for 4 weeks. So it was all right, you know, because if after that 4 weeks I gained like a few more pounds that I wanted to, we were going back into a cut anyways. The second time, since we had more time, Mark said we're going to go a little bit slower and we're going to increase we're not going to jump right up to maintenance. We're going to increase a little bit at a time to let my body adjust as we were increasing the calories and the macros.
I think it's good to initially when you go into that maintenance phase, it's sometimes you don't trust your own body. You know, it's like you had to have trust in me, but it's like if it's never something you've ever done, you know, increasing the calories back up, you think, well, this is counterproductive. I'm increasing more food. Like this is the opposite of what I want to do. So when you do have more food, naturally, you're going to have more food volume inside of your body. You're going to have more carbohydrates inside of your body. That's going to, you know, increase overall water weight, and you will actually weigh heavier. Even if you're maintaining energy in and energy out, you will see that scale bump up a little bit. And that can be quite like worrying for people. You know, you can see that scale going up. It's like, hey, I've just worked for the past like 8 to 12 weeks to lose weight or lose body fat. But, you know, you see that weight going down and then you start seeing that weight going up. But as you know, as we saw that weight just goes up a little bit, that initial spike, and then it levels out, and then you are actually at maintenance. So if your weight kind of goes up a little bit, that doesn't mean that you've gained body fat. It just means that you've gained a little bit of weight. So understanding the difference between weight and body fat, even in and of itself, is a huge thing, because your weight will fluctuate around a little bit. And especially when going out to eat at restaurants and you have maybe some sodium rich food, like you have a meal out, there's maybe the chef uses a little bit more salt than you do at home, you're going to see these natural spikes, and not letting those affect you too much is really huge. And so I think with, you know, getting to that point of like true long-term like maintenance or using maintenance breaks, it's really helpful to just test it out and to start feeling confident in your own body that, hey, I can eat a little bit more food, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to just gain weight exponentially. So yeah, it's good that, you know, you had that experience with that.
I think too, in the beginning, so what we do, or what I do with this program, is I weigh myself every day. And in the beginning, I was really nervous about that too, because I've always been kind of afraid of the scale and what's the number going to say and how is it going to affect me for the rest of the day? If I'm going to be in a really good mood because it was down, or am I going to be really upset because it was up a little bit? But I think it was really helpful because it taught me that there is that little bit of fluctuation, and the downward trend that you see is really more important. And if you weigh yourself once a week, like who knows what that one day is going to show, because it could be a little bit higher because a little bit more sodium, and then it won't affect me as much because I'm learning that that little bit of fluctuation is all right. And even if it's up one day, it'll be down the next day or a couple of days later or whatever it is.
Yeah. So I'd love to kind of wrap up this really insightful conversation by asking you, what are you most proud of accomplishing over the last 10 months?
Oh my gosh. That's such a loaded question. There's so many things, but I guess as it relates to this, is I'm most proud of being in a place where I am full of energy and not afraid to eat. And I've gotten to a place where I can just be in maintenance and be at a weight and a body composition that I'm proud of, and I have the confidence that I do that came along with that. And just all of the great things that have come along with learning how to eat in maintenance and learning how to maintain, well, I guess first learning the sustainable way to lose weight, and then learning how to maintain that weight loss, and knowing that this is it, and that I'm I don't ever have to go back and do it again and get to that low place where I always ended up at mentally when my weight fluctuated back up again. And this is just how I'm going to be for the rest of my life.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing your story, sharing your kind of tips and experience. And also thank you for trusting us. Thank you for trusting Marc along this journey. And yeah, you just have a really inspiring story, and I appreciate you sharing it.
Thank you. It was great being here.
And thank you as well, Marc.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Vegan Gym Podcast. I hope that you found a ton of value in this. If you enjoyed this, then please be sure to check out our other podcasts and content on YouTube, and we'll catch you in the next episode.